Hello, welcome back. My name is Ari, and if you can't tell by, the change of background and the nearly empty bookshelf right next to me, I've moved, but my stuff hasn't completed the move yet. So I'm doing my wrap up for the month today, but I'm not going to have like the graphics and everything that I normally have because I don't have a computer to do the graphics with. So this is what we've got. We've got my notebook and all of the information. You just don't get the pictures, and I don't know that I'm going to be holding up all of the books that I read physically because some of them are in boxes, though some of them I do have with me. So a little bit of a stunted wrap up this month, but we're going to do it anyway. So in September I read 21 books. And that was 6,304 pages, averaging about 210 pages per day and 300 pages per book. So I read mostly shorter books. I read a lot of graphic novels, and honestly, I spent most of the month moving. So I didn't have a whole lot of time to just sit down and read like I normally do. Out of the books that I read, 10 were by female authors, 11 of them were by male authors. Demographic, 20 of them were adult books and one young adult book. So not a whole lot of YA. I am going to interrupt myself here to say that I'm looking at this viewfinder and I look very yellow. So if I'm yellow, I haven't fixed, like, the settings could have got screwed up on my camera during the move. I don't know. I'll figure it out later. If this video looks bad, please forgive me. We'll fix it at a later date. Genre. 6 of the books I read were fantasy, surprising absolutely no one. 4 of them were graphic novels, 3 science fiction, 3 nonfiction, 3 thrillers, 1 book of poetry, and 1 just general fiction book. The formats, 10 of them were physical books, 5 of them were ebooks, and because I was moving, 6 of them were audiobooks. So while packing and like walking back and forth everywhere or traveling, I was listening to audiobooks constantly. So usually I don't read that many audiobooks if you're new here. Usually it's like 1 a month, but this month we went hard with the audiobooks. The source of the books that I read, 7 of them were new books that I bought this year in 2021. 4 of them were books that I bought before 2021 or were given to me, I guess. 2 of them came out of book boxes this month. 4 of them were ARCs. 1 was from Kindle Unlimited and 3 were from my library. As for star ratings, it was a pretty decent reading month, honestly. I had 3 5-star books. I had 9 4-star books. That's a lot of 4 stars. I had 6 3-star books, 2 2-star books, and 1 1-star book. And I DNF'd 1 book. And it was a book that I think when I made my TBR, I said I was probably going to DNF it, but we'll get to that later in the video. So, stats are done. Let's get into talking about the books. And if you're new here, I lightning round the books that I talk about. I will tell you basically, like, this is the book I read. Good, bad, mediocre, I don't care, blah, blah, blah. And if you want, like, a more in-depth review about, like, what exactly I did or didn't like about it, I do link my Goodreads reviews down in the comments below. Occasionally, I will vlog the books that I read, so I may have spoken about something more in-depth in a previous vlog if you want to browse through my backlist and see what other videos I made. So the first book I read this month was The Last Graduate by Naomi Novik. This was an ARC. I love this series. I love the first book. I didn't like the second book as much as I liked the first book, and I was pissed about the cliffhanger, but I still gave it 4 stars. I highly recommend this. if you have the same taste as I do, but this series isn't for everybody, so you may not like it. Definitely check other reviews. Next up, I read The Fated Sky by Mary Robinette Kowal. This was, again, the second book in a series. I loved the first book in the series, and again, didn't like this one as much. But The Fated Sky was much more of a fall off as far as the second book, and I gave this one 3 stars. It felt like it was just repeating the same story again. Next up, another arc, I read Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune. This is not a sequel, even though the cover is very similar to The House in the Cerulean Sea. It's not a sequel. I'm not even sure it's set in the same world, but I like this more than I liked House in the Cerulean Sea, though it is very sweet sad, and I gave it 4 stars. After that, I read The Republic of Thieves by Scott Lynch. This is the 3rd book in the Gentleman Bastard series, and it is a reread for me because the 4th book comes out in November, so I was rereading the first 3 books. I do like this, but I have a love-hate relationship with the Gentleman Bastard series, so I ended up giving this 4 stars instead of 5 stars. I love the characters, I hate the writing, and that pretty much goes for all of the books in this series. I think this might be my favorite so far, but maybe not. Maybe it's The Lives of Locke Lamora, maybe it's this book. I don't know. They're close. They're close. After that, I read a graphic novel, Fangs by Sarah Anderson. This is not really like a complete story. It's like each page is like a different look at these characters' lives. So you have a vampire and a werewolf who are dating. It's adorable in like the most murderous way possible, and this like cover in addition is beautiful. So I very, very much enjoyed this, though it's not really a complete story, so I didn't feel inclined to give it 5 stars. I gave it 4 stars. After that, I read Paper Girls Volume 1, and then the book that I read at the very end of the month was Paper Girls Volume 2, so I did read 2 volumes of Paper Girls, even though they were very split apart. I'm going to talk about them together. The author of Paper Girls is the same author who wrote Saga, which I love. I don't like Paper Girls as much as I like Saga, and I'm not really sure what's going on. So I like it enough to keep reading it, but I didn't instantly fall in love with it like I did Saga. Next up, I read a book that I got from Page 1, which was The Past is Red by Catherine M. Valenti. I have read a book, or I should say I DNF'd a book by Catherine M. Valenti earlier this year. This one might be my favorite book of the year. It was everything perfectly weird that I love in a book, where you don't entirely understand what's going on, and the character is unlikable, but it was just written in the most wonderfully whimsical way that I am head over heels in love with. So I gave this 5 stars, and it is definitely my favorite book of this month, if not the entire year. Next up, I listened to The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. I have heard his name pronounced a bajillion different ways, but I think it's Michaelides. Anyway, this is his 2nd novel, and if you've been on BookTube a lot, you've probably seen a lot of mixed reviews of this, or not necessarily mixed reviews, it's mostly, wow, I expected so much of this book and it was really awful. And guess what? I didn't expect anything at all from this book because I didn't even like The Silent Patient that much, and it was still really freaking awful. I can't say that I recommend this to anybody because honestly, it was that bad. Actually, I take that back. It wasn't even bad. It was just entirely mediocre. I'm not really good with thrillers where I don't hate them, but I don't love them either. And this one, it was like a disappointing 3. Let's just go with it was a disappointing 3. I don't recommend going out of your way to get it, but if you're really interested, pick it up from your library, maybe a used bookstore in a year or so, but don't pay full price for this book. It is not worth the full price tag. Next up, I read The Traitor Beru Cormorant by Seth Dickinson. And this one was one of the many books recommended to me where the main character is an unlikable female character. And I hated this book. The unlikableness of this female character didn't matter at all to me because the book is literally about math and politics, and I think math and politics are the two things that I want to read about absolutely the least. I also truly struggled to understand the character's motivations in this book, and overall just really didn't like it, but I gave it 2 stars. After that, I read a book that I got in my queer book box called Bessie Smith by Jackie Kay. And this was supposed to be a biography, but it read more like fan fiction. This was offensively awful for a biography, and I gave it 1 star. Next up, I listened to A Life on Our Planet by David Attenborough, and oh my god, you have to listen to this. Don't read this book. Like, you can't read a book by Sir David Attenborough. You have to listen to it. You have to experience his voice with this narrative. You can't just read words on paper. So I highly recommend it. It's got some great insight and information on global warming, and it was fantastic audiobook. Can't recommend it enough. Next up, I read a poetry collection called Dearly by Margaret Atwood, and this was just incredibly mediocre. It wasn't poetry for me, and I wasn't moved or put off by any of the poetry, so it was just a solid 3-star. I would only recommend this if you were really a huge fan of poetry and Margaret Atwood as a writer. The next up, I read The Guest List by Lucy Foley, and this was another thriller, and it won the Goodreads Choice Awards for 2020. Why? I am not good at solving mysteries, and I guessed almost every single plot twist in this. I, again, just really don't think I'm a thriller person, so maybe don't take my opinion on the reviews on any of the thrillers I read, but I did not care about any of these people at all. They were all assholes, and I felt like I wasted my time reading about these entitled asshole people who all deserved all of the bad things that happened to them. Next up, I read Before the Coffee Gets Cold by, I'm gonna butcher this, Toshikazu Kawaguchi, I believe is how you say his name. This is a translated work of fiction, translated from Japanese, about a cafe in Japan where you can travel through time, but the restrictions on how you travel through time are so demanding that it's not really worth it to ever do it for almost everybody. But it tells 4 different stories of people who have been involved with this time travel aspect of the cafe, and the book is more about like relationships and not necessarily about the time travel itself. I ended up reading this month because I got an arc of the second book in the series that comes out next month. So next month I will be reading Tales from the Cafe, which is the second book in the series again. But I liked it a lot. It was very like calming and refreshing and different from what I normally read, but very, very well written. Next I read So You've Been Publicly Shamed by Jon Ronson, and I don't know really what to think about this. A lot of what was in this book was interesting to read about, but I disagreed with Jon Ronson's opinions on a lot of things, and his like enabling of like racism, or not necessarily enabling, more as he as a white man has no grounds to forgive these people's racist statements. Yes, he takes it up upon himself to forgive these racist statements because he didn't think they meant to be racist. And to be fair, they probably didn't mean to be racist, but even if you don't mean to be racist, you can still say something that's racist. And just, I fundamentally disagreed with a lot of his reasoning for things, but I also agreed that the internet takes public shaming way too far sometimes. Like, tell people they're wrong, don't tell people you're going to kill them. I ended up giving it 2 stars. Next up, I read The Sundown Motel by Simone St. James. This was another one of the mini audiobooks that I was listening to this month, and another thriller. And you know what? I loved this thriller. This was such a good thriller. This is the kind of thriller that I want to read. So if you know other books that are similar to The Sundown Motel, please recommend them in the comments, because I want to read more thrillers, but most of them I don't care. This one I cared, this one I liked. I didn't really guess any of the twists. Some of them were not so much twists, like you were supposed to be able to like realize something as the character realized it, and it's not really supposed to be secret. But yeah, I very, very, very much enjoyed this book. And if you want a thriller with like actual haunted, ghostly aspects in it, pick this up. Highly recommend. After that, I read DarkOne by Brandon Sanderson, and this is a graphic novel. I like this. This isn't set in his Cosmere, and I didn't like his other graphic novels, White Sands, that much, but I really, really liked this one. This is a like a twist on like the Chosen One trope, where like the Chosen One, Dark One aspect plays out every generation in this universe, and Brandon Sanderson takes it in this comic and subverts the trope, and he did a fantastic job subverting it. If you are a big fan of Brandon Sanderson, I would recommend reading this, and if you like the idea of subverting a Chosen One trope, then I also recommend picking this up, because it's a graphic novel. It's pretty short, and it's very well done. The story's very cool. Next, I read Hummingbird Salamander by Jeff Vandermeer, and I did listen to this on audio again. Jeff Vandermeer is an author that has been recommended to me as somebody who writes unlikable females, and this one was interesting because usually with male authors who write unlikable females, I have a hard time actually liking the unlikable nature of the female. This one, I loved the character. I just did not understand any vague motivations for the story at all. Like, it's a mystery, and she's trying to solve the mystery, and I understood all of that, but I couldn't figure out why this character would bother to solve this stupid mystery that didn't seem to affect her in any way. Like, why is she solving this mystery? And it does answer it by the end of the story, but even then, I didn't feel like the motivation was strong enough, if that makes sense. I don't know. I just spent most of the story going like, why the fuck is she doing this shit? Instead of like really getting into the story. And then when that was finally answered at like the very end of the book, I was like, why the fuck is she doing this shit? Next up, I read Rhapsodic by Laura Thalassa, and this was one of my 5-star predictions for the year, and I gave it 4 stars. Which seems to be what most of my 5-star predictions are turning out to be. Anyway, we'll cover that at the end of the year. But yeah, it was fine. I liked the story, but I just didn't feel involved enough to give it 5 stars. Like, I liked it, but it just didn't give me that 5-star, like, oh my god feeling. So, good. Recommended if you like fantasy romance, but just wasn't a 5-star for me. After that, I read Allied and Strife, which is the 6 books in the Cursed Elf series by Deidre Drake. This I got from the author. I'm friends with the author, so I got this book from her the end of July, I think, and just didn't have time to really fit it into my TBR until now. I really like this series. It is another fantasy romance with like elves, vampires, gods, magic, things like that, Vikings, and it's really good, but this is the 6th book in the series, so it's like hard for me to talk about this particular book without giving any spoilers. But the one thing that I can say about the series overall that I really enjoy is just how the characters interact. It's very polyamorous relationships, but almost everybody is very open about talking about their feelings and their assumptions. They'll like talk out the miscommunication as the miscommunication happens, which I love because I hate the miscommunication trope. The fact that these hundreds of year old fantasy characters act like creatures that are hundreds to thousands of years old and have fucking adult conversations instead of assuming and miscommunicating like a teen drama makes me love this series. So I highly recommend you pick up this series. The first book is called Cursed by Furies, and it is available on Kindle and probably other bookstores. I will link a place to pick it up, or I'll link her website below so you can just go there and look at it there. The last book I'm going to talk about is The Flatulence, which I DNF'd because the writing is some of the most pretentious writing that I've experienced in a long time. What I think this is about is 2 characters who are in a relationship, but they are very physically and mentally abusive towards each other. And so it's all about like their fights and their arguments, and basically they're punishing themselves, like the flagellate. They're punishing themselves by staying together even though they're really not meant for each other because they're both abusive towards each other. And there's like a religious aspect to this as well, but it's hard to tell what the fuck this is about because the language in here is like somebody took a normal sentence and then took out a thesaurus and switched out every single word with something that sounds interesting. Like I stopped at chapter 4, so I'm just gonna read the first sentence of chapter 4 so you can get an idea of what this writing was like. Dust is dizzied in New York. People are powdered with an opaque, gritty haze, trespassing their separate existences. They fructify in a nomadic flux. Like, what the fuck does that mean? I've never even heard the word fructify ever in my entire life before I read it just now in this book. But yeah, very pretentious. Done. Anyway, that is everything in this video. The video that I have up Tuesday, we're going to be going through and organizing my empty bookshelf right here. So if you are interested in seeing where I'm putting all of my TBR stuff, come back Tuesday. Hit that subscribe button. I think that is it for today, and I'll catch you Tuesday. Bye.